Hey, what's up, everybody? We're from Siphon TCG and Dash Community. We are back. This is going to be a mixed episode of our Road to National A to Z series, as well as my Dash primer for the RTN season. I was originally going to be making this in a PowerPoint form, but because I am on limited time, I do not want to. I want to make sure you guys have this for the season. Now, I do want to preface this before I go further. Um, I will personally not be playing Dash. I know a lot of people were excited to see me take Dash to the Road National Seasons, as I've been pretty much the flag bearer for this deck since my first ever video on it. Obviously, there's been a lot of people that's picked up the deck, had success, and obviously people like T have not put down the deck and they've continued to have the deck, but when it comes to making content and pushing the archetype forward, I've done my best to be that person. But unfortunately, when it has came to paper testing, uh, I've just been enjoying Kano a lot, and as well as I'm letting people borrow cards, which is also one of the reasons I actually cannot play Dash. But if I even had access to the cards, it'd probably be a coin flip on the card right up if I was to play Dash or Kano. But right now, I'm most likely going to be locked in on Kano. And I'll go over a few reasons why I am not playing Dash. And obviously, Kano's just the other deck I have besides Bolton. I'm not playing Bolton. But so let's talk about Dash and the Outsiders meta at the start. At the start, we perceived that Iyslander and Oldhim would still be the top decks, with other decks like Briar, Hybrid Dash. Obviously, the Rangers got some juice. We thought the meta would look larger this summer with just a few other decks propped up. What we did not foresee is the rise in Dromai and just how powerful the Rangers actually were. I think the two things that seeing that was just the builds of Dromai did change, and even it's not saying they're just now one build. It's just all builds of Dromai have changed somewhat, as well as the player base has gotten better at Dromai. Now, there's still a lot of palate cleanser Dromais, as we like to say, Dromais that aren't very good. But the good Dromais are just scary, and I do want to clear a misconception about the Dromai matchup, and I just don't want to forget this. A lot of people are saying, how does Dash beat Dromai? And I just want to point people to my live stream at the Calling Indie when I faced 4 Dromais and went undefeated against Dromai. Now, I will say the aggro version probably is the hardest to face, just because they have mixed threats, versus like the dragon version, where your only game plan is to shoot dragons until you're able to shoot face. And when you're able to shoot face, you're in a good spot, because that means they don't have dragons. Right? And unlike things like Oldhim, you're not losing cards in your deck as much as a rapid of a pace to kill dragons. And unlike Oldhim, you can kill multiple dragons, like, pretty easily. Like, if Dromai has a board of 3 Etcher Wrathwings and like a Chromai or something, you can kill Chromai and 2 Ether Wings. Oldhim is just like, I guess Chromai's dead, your turn. Now, obviously, you do have less poppers than Oldhim. Oldhim can have upwards of 40. I don't remember what our final count is in this deck. Our final count is... Final count is 10, which is actually less than it has been recently. So we only have 10 poppers versus the Oldhim, right? So when it comes to being able to kill dragons on their turn, it's going to be much harder. But obviously, it is just the sacrifice that we make. We can't just put our deck full of every popper legal, or our deck kind of just is bad. Alright, so we do have to work with what we got, but the 10 poppers a lot of times is all we need in our deck. Because again, unlike Oldhim, we can kill multiple dragons at once on our turn. Oldhim cannot. That is why I believe we do have an edge in the Dromai matchup if they're on dragons. If they're on aggro, it is still winnable. It is just harder because you have to make a lot more decisions with how you block and your resource management. But I'll tell you, though, probably the biggest thing when it came to my issues with Control Dash in this meta is the Ranger matchup, specifically Lexi, as Lexi has a big mix of representation and power level. It is kind of similar to what Phi was for us. Phi had a mix of high representation and power level, which made playing Dash hard, but the difference was, even though Phi had a high representation, Odom and Iyslander also had a maybe just slightly lower representation. And our matchups versus those heroes were so favorable, no matter what version they were on. The issue with this meta is we're still favored in Odom. We're favored into one version of Dromai, but there's 3. Well, 4, but 3. And then the Lexi matchup specifically, like the Azalea matchup is like fine. Like it has some of the same issues, but not all of them. But the Lexi matchup specifically just feels just like Phi. It feels your opponent has to mess up, and you do need to get some luck. Like you need them to have like a very largely red hand where they can't shoot a lot of arrows at you, or they can't have arrows with a lot of impactful, keywords impactful on hits. Like the Blood Rod arrow, while it just looks like damage, I actually think that's a very impactful arrow against us, because it turns into damage that we can't actually stop. We want to be largely able to control the damage that we take. That means we can't stop. Because we're a deck that doesn't arsenal a bunch, we actually get absolutely clapped by Codex of Frailty. Which then, maybe we have to actually change our play patterns to actually have an arsenal. But then, when that comes to the case, that makes our plan of fatiguing worse, because now we're actually using more cards than blocking. And there's just so many things with that matchup, where I have tried to tailor this deck to have a better matchup than originally it did. Which we did sacrifice some spots in other matchups, but if you're going to take this deck, which, depending on how I do at one of my RTNs, if I can qualify for Nats, I'll probably just be on Dash the rest of them, just because I do still just enjoy the deck. It is going to be hard. If your area has a lot of Lexi or a lot of Dromai where you don't know what version they're going to be on at the start of the game, it is just going to be hard for you. That is something I do want to preface. I guess all that out the way. Let's actually get into the deck, and again, while this will be a part of the Road to National A to Z series, this is also my Control Dash primer, so this is going to be a long one, so gear up, guys. So starting off with the headpiece, this is going to be our standard list. This is going to be Arcanite Skullcap. The reason why we're running Arcanite Skullcap over things like Providence, which some people do run, while having the ability to put a card in your arsenal and not really get punished for it is nice. It's CNC protection if you end up putting something there. But I do just think the blocking of breakpoints and the separate block is just very powerful. And into like the Iyslander matchup specifically, if Iyslander does end up showing up, being able just to have AB3 with your headpiece, because I actually do like Skullcap into Iyslander more than Verizon model, even though Verizon model does have AB2. Because Iyslander also does present physical attacks, even though they're not really on hits, just being able to get more mileage to your headpiece. Because the issue with that build is you actually have to use more you have to lose more cards in your deck to block stuff, and you're a lot of times still going to be leaking damage. While we're not going to fatigue, if there is a way that we can still stop a similar amount of damage over the game and not lose cards, I think we're going to do that. Right? And this does also allow us to, when we play Skullcap, we can have Skullcap, we can have No Rune Gloves, still have AB4 for lower, and actually get a little fancy with our Achilles Accelerators in certain pitch stack games, because it is a deck where you do intentionally pitch. But obviously, if you just prefer Providence, or you only have a Providence, I think it's a very negligible difference. I think it's like a 1 or 2 point difference, like percentage-wise. And I will go ahead and fast forward to something else. You will notice there is no Heart of Fyendel in this deck. That is a similar thing with Heart of Fyendel. Heart of Fyendel, if you do have one, will give you like an extra 1 or 2% EV on the game, but it is not a deal breaker. I do think Iyslander does need Heart of Fyendel. I do think certain builds will do need Heart of Fyendel. This deck does not need Heart of Fyendel. It just likes it, if that makes sense. Tunic. Best chess piece in the game. You can't name me a better chess piece. Like, other chess pieces might convert to more damage over the game, like Courage Blade Hold and like Bolton will convert to like 30 plus damage, right? But if you're talking about the consistency through multiple decks and almost every single game, there's not a single deck in Flesh and Blood that says, wow, I have to run a Tunic? Wow, that sucks. They'll be like, okay, I have Tunic, cool, let's get it. Ironrot Gauntlet and Ironhide Legs. Some people are asking for Ironrot Gauntlets, Ironrot Legs to be in this spot. Well, I do see the reason that people like that because of things like Snatch, for example. You can just give Ironrot and a block 3 and it is covered up. But I do think, again, with like Oldhim being able to go tall, with Ranger being able to go tall / wide, I think the extra block from the equipment is more necessary. Because a lot of the times that you would give Ironrot Legs and like a block would be the turns that you're looking to pivot and keep like 3 cards in hand to fight back, right? But those scenarios don't come up as often as the scenarios where the extra block from your legs and gauntlet being 4 instead of 2 total being impactful. Like, think about if you're against an Azalea, right? You're going to want both of these Ironhides more than Ironrots. Now, let's say you're going against Katsu. Ironrot, sure, will probably be better EV on the turn that you use it. But I think I just value these more. And at worst, you can turn a blue into your hand into a D-React. I think that's pretty good. And especially is really good if you ever are running a Wish Spite into like Azalea or Bravo or something. Now a blue just becomes into an unmovable from Arsenal. It's pretty gas. We only run Techno Plasma Pistol because every other weapon is dog ass, and don't ever run anything else. Apologize, I had to put a piece of candy in my mouth. So I can keep my throat. I'm trying to keep my throat from being dry because it's gonna be a long video. All right, starting off with the attacks, we have Command and Conquer. What does this card not do besides the arcane damage? That's about all it doesn't do. It is a very efficient 2-card hand, where especially if you have a counter on like one of your items already, you can go like, for example, you can go like put a counter on pistol, already have a counter on chamber, shoot pistol, give it go again, CNC. That's an 8-point damage turn where the CNC probably has to get blocked depending on what your opponent does have, and then that's just insane EV for you. It is a popper for Dromai. It's a good card against other defensive decks that run defense reactions. It's interaction with the arsenal, and it's a block 30. The only downside is a red. It's the only downside. This card was not allowed to ever be a different color than red. Like, you cannot give this card these stats and these effects and it not be like, this is blue, it'd be the best card in the game, and you couldn't convince me otherwise. But yeah, big things. Popper for Dromai. Our interaction with the arsenal, especially where Ranger is really big. Now, I will say this. The misconception that this card blows out Rangers is not correct, and I will tell you why. Sorry, I have the plug in my headset because it keeps dying. The way they started using their 3 of a kinds makes this card invalid, and here, let me tell you why. Obviously, because we're not a pummel deck, what people will do is they'll have a 4-card hand. They'll block with 2 cards against your CNC. They'll keep their 1 or 2 cards in arsenal and have a 2-card hand. They'll pitch a blue or a yellow or even a red, play 3 of a kind. So now those 2 cards you stripped from their hand now just became 3. They will have more cards in their hand after they resolve the 3 of a kind than they started with. Or, lo and God forbid, they just let it hit. If they let it hit, you're probably about to get effed up. But it's the interaction that you do need. You can't not really run Command & Conquer in a Ranger, like specifically. You can't not. And also because Odom's big, they run D-Reacts, you kind of want to stop the efficiency of their D-Reacts. And it's a popper for Dromai. So into the big 3, this is one of the best cards we do have to offer. Vaporcine 0/4 D-React, can help smooth over your next draws. Pretty solid. Not much to say there. We are running 2 Induction Chamber. This is 2 of the 5 pieces of Exodia. If you guys ever watch Yu-Gi-Oh! This is the left arm of Exodia. This is the right arm of Exodia. This is the right leg of Exodia. This is the left leg of Exodia. And this is his long But talking about these weapons in conjunction, because these weapons do mostly function with each other, this is a combo that does 15 damage. And people might look at that and see 5 cards and be like, how is it still 15 damage? I will briefly explain it to you real quick. So, if you have counters on all 5 of these items, and you have a blue in hand, you remove all 3 counters off of Plasma Purifier. What Plasma Purifier says is, once per turn action, you remove a steam counter from Plasma Purifier. Target Mechanologist pistol you control gains +1. So it starts with a base of 2. We're going to remove counters from 3 of them, making it 5. So now our pistol's going to come in for 5. We're going to shoot our pistol for 5 damage. Now we're going to say none of this gets blocked. Then we're going to use Induction Chamber. What Induction Chamber says, remove a steam counter from Induction Chamber, target pistol gets go again. So now, we pitch the blue to put a counter on Pleasant, but we have 2 floating. We're going to give it go again. Now we're going to break the chain by putting a counter on our pistol. We have 1 floating. We are then going to shoot it again for 5 because this Plasma Purifier is not the next. It's till the end of the turn. So now we're going to swing for another 5. So now we've swung for 10. And mind you, we haven't lost a card because we pitched. So unlike other decks that if they want to swing for 15, they're losing cards. We are not losing cards. So we're going to swing for with our second pistol. Boom. We're going to give it go again a second time. They're going to take 5. They've been dealt 10. We're going to use our last floating mana. Put a counter on pistol. Shoot a pistol for 5. That is 15 damage. Without losing a single card. That's a very, very powerful interaction. And I do have another dash guide out if you guys want to see pistol math, because pistol math is very, very useful. It's kind of a lot to go over, even though on the surface level it seems simple, and once you become very good at dash, it seems very simple, but it would be a lot to go over in this video, and I do want to keep this somewhat concise. Well, obviously I am going to try to give you more information than average, but if you guys want to see how to math out your pistol lines, go and watch that everything you need to know about dash guide. Next is probably one of the cards that a lot of people will see and they'll shake their head at. They'll be like, why is this in the deck? We're running 3 red, 3 blue, 1 yellow Raging Onslaught. So, what Raging Onslaught is that's Raging Onslaught. Oh yeah, it comes in for 7. That's all. It is a 3 for 7. Why is a 3 for 7 in the deck if it has no text? There has to be stuff better, right? Well, it depends on what your game plan is. And with our game plan, where a lot of times we're running 2-card hands, we'll need Popper for Dromai, we'll need to kill dragons, like big dragons on the field, this card kind of just does it all. While being a 3 block, one of the cards that a lot of people try to put into this deck to do a similar role is Fyndal's Fighting Spirit. My issue with Fyndal's Fighting Spirit, while we are running through yellow, is it's a 2-block. And the life gain isn't almost on all the time. Right? How our natural play patterns are of being very defensive, especially in the early game, you're probably going to be higher than your opponents. One of the reasons I don't play Heart of Findo anymore. Because especially when I play Dash, super defensive at the start. Like, I will arsenal an item, even if I could block with 2 cards and play it. I'm just going to arsenal it. Because I don't feel like taking 10 plus damage to establish an item. I'm not going to do that. Unless I know for a fact I'm getting a D-React, an arsenal, or I'm going to draw a double D-React like from my pitch stack, and I know I can suppress a lot of damage and turn the corner. If I can't do that, I'm going to arsenal that pistol. Which means, if I'm playing more defensive, I'm taking less damage. If I'm taking less damage, I'm going to be a higher life total than my opponent. And that means things like Fyndal's Fighting Spirit loses points of value. While Raging Onslaught is always going to be a 3 for 7 through block. Always going to be a 3 for 6. Always going to be a 3 for 5. And one of the big reasons, again, why we're running this is specifically into Oldhim and specifically into Dromai. And with Dromai, this adds to our popper count. This is 4 poppers that we run just here. And when it comes to the big dragons, outside of specifically Uvia, all of our cards can kill it. Now, Blue Raging Onslaught cannot kill Uvia, but obviously a pistol shot, go again, plus Raging Onslaught will kill Uvia. But Uvia is like one of the least problematic dragons. Like, she's probably top 4, but she's not like the most. So, I do think that it still belongs. Now, if it ever comes to a world where Uvia just becomes like way too oppressive, we might sub out Blue Raging Onslaught for another actual popper, or or just a generic 6. Well, I guess it's still a popper if it's 6, but we'll try to one-shot the Uvia. But for right now, obviously, Raging Onslaught does fulfill what we're trying to do. Into Oldhim, you can get really good chains. So late game, let me tell you how good this stuff is late game. I almost always pitch my Raging Onslaughts for late game. When you have full items set up, and they're going to get like so much out of the Rampart, you can go, okay, shoot for 5. They'll crown Rampart, block with a card, cover it up. You'll give a go again, you'll break the chain. Swing pistol. Well, now they'll give you a card and Rampart. Well, that's another one that's been done. You'll break the chain. Now you have the option of, because they'll probably have 2 cards in hand. Maybe 1, depending on what they did. Right? Instead of going, alright, well, I guess I'll just shoot it again for 5. Oh, your Rampart blocks 3, so my 15 turned into 2. Now, what you can do is, if you have spare mana, and you can still cast a Raging Onslaught, you can just keep the counters on your items. And you can send this, and they can't re-block with Rampart, right? And if they have 1 card in hand, well, it looks like they're taking 7 because they're not going to not have a card for Crown of Seeds. Like, Crown of Seeds is one of the biggest reasons, along with Rampart, but because you have both Entwine, Crown of Seeds is one of the biggest things that helps them out. It will give them a fresh card, and it's a pseudo energy potion for like their turn. Well, now if they're taking off a Rampart, that's again a card they lose, and 2 mana they lost. Which that's 2 less Rampart activations they have for free. Right? For no cost. So, in another example, if you have everything loaded up, you can go pistol for 5. You blocked it out. Cool. Give it go again. You'll still have a counter on a chamber, and you can break chain, put a counter on a pistol. If you want. You don't have to, but if you want. I would probably rather not. I would just probably keep my counter on my next chamber. If I have extra resources and I can still throw Raging Onslaught, I'll just put counters on my items. And then I'm just going to Raging Onslaught. Because now, they're not just going to take 7. Odom is never going to just take 7, like ever. Again, unless they only have 1 card in hand and their Crown of Seeds is vital to be able to be activated. So now you can just strip 1 or 2 cards out of their hand again. You get to keep counters on your pistols. So now next turn, you can do it again and be more efficient. Because the snowball that happens is the first time you get to shoot for 15 and then have counters on your items going into your next turn. So then it requires you to have less cards, so it means you can actually block more and then still send the pain. Or if you draw reds, you're not hurt as much. And you can get into these scenarios solely because of cards like Rage Onslaught. Like, you have to see how much I just described when it comes to a vanilla 3 for 7. That's how integral, like, all the parts of this deck are. No other deck will use Raging Onslaught like we'll use Raging Onslaught. Right. Going on to Sigil. Oh yes, I said Sigil of Solace. It's never going to be Sigil. You'll never convince me otherwise. It's just a straight game 3. And as you guys can see, Healing Bomb has been taken out of the deck. It's been taken out for a while now, but they have the exact same effect. But what's the difference? Well, this is an instant, which plays around a lot of stuff. We can put this in our arsenal and not lose tempo. And this card can make a lot of people overextend. Right? Especially at the end of the game. People will try to maybe overextend to kill you. And you can use Sigil to give your life total a certain buffer. Well, their overextension will now be the reason they lose. Is it 100% needed in the deck? No. But I think having a turn 1 play like this, and again, talking about the overextension that some decks will just have, I think it is good enough to make a slot in the deck. Sink Below. It's over 4D react. That filters. If you're playing Flesh and Blood, and you're playing anything but a Ooga Booga aggro deck, you're going to play Sink Below. We're on red and yellow unmovables. The yellow unmovables are a new addition to the deck to help fight Ranger on their like Rainrazor's turn, or Azalea on her just turns. I do like unmovable as a card. Obviously, efficiency-wise, like unmovable is just the same as blocking with 2 cards. But when you factor in it being put in from the arsenal, does make it just a little bit better. And obviously, because of decks like Bravo and Dominate, this can just stop the crush from happening if randomly the crush is relevant. The crush will rarely be relevant outside of like things like Crippling Crush, but who knows, right? Or they have things like Terra Sunder, which again has Dominate. Well, now Terra Sunder can be covered up with a piece of equipment and immovable. Yellow, specifically. Router Immovable, you guys already know how much of a demon Router Immovable is. The card's gas. But one reason I do like Yellow Immovable, it is also a resource card, but the reason we don't play the blue is because the blue on average will just be a lower rate than blocking with 2 cards in almost every situation. And at that point, the argument of Dominate, I don't think the argument of Dominate is enough to run the blue, but I do think it's enough to run the yellow, if that makes sense. Yellow, Fyndal's Fighting Spirit. Fyndal's Fighting Spirit has been added back to the deck. It was out for last meta. But I do think with the Surgeons of Dromai, adding more poppers to the deck is necessary. And in the occasional world against aggro decks and certain mid-range strategies, if you are lower than your opponent, you do get the benefit off of gaining 1 life on offense or defense. And one secret thing, like I said, I really like in this deck is because most of our attacks are just vanilla. They're not really going to be blocked. Like, who's really going to block a Fyndal's Fighting Spirit? Like if you're Briar and I send a Fyndal's Fighting Spirit at you, you're going to look at it and be like, no blocks, because why would you? it's not doing anything besides making your left 6 less. It's not drawing me any card, it's not buffing my defense, it's not doing anything. It's just vanilla damage. Which is why I really do enjoy attacks like this. Spark of Genius. This is just additional copies of your items with the addition of being a 3-block. And for the first time ever in one of my testings, I did do a pitch stack against a Dromai. And Spark of Genius was actually part of that pitch stack. And I actually got to draw a card of a Spark of Genius, pop my Achilles accelerators, and kept going. It was a really, really cool line I did. It's a really, really cool line. I think the line was like, I think it was like Overloop. Yeah, I think it was like Overloop, a pop Achilles accelerators, Spark of Genius. I think I found like an induction chamber, drew a card. And then I knew it was a blue. And then I got to do a bunch of pistol shots. Well, alternatively, I could have kept boosting if I wanted to. But it was kind of unnecessary. But, again, sometimes turns just line up like that. Where you don't actually get punished for boosting. Or, if you just want to get, again, those extra pistol shots in, you'll probably draw blue off of this. You better keep going. And at the end of the day, it is just a tutor. And it is how, in your item matchups, you get 2 items fast enough. Alright, now we're going on to the blues, which is the meat and potatoes of this deck. This is the part of the deck where I will be going through stuff very, very fast, except for a few cards. Because largely the text on these cards don't actually matter, besides the blue pitch and the block value. Brutal Assault is a blue block 3 that comes in for 4. Last Shift Effort. This is a really unique card against other control and mid-range strategies. This is a card that if we stack up for late game, there will be times where you just have 3 last-ditch efforts in your deck, and your opponent will just lose. Because their left toe is obviously going to be very low, their deck size is probably going to be low, and you can just deliver a clapping with last shift effort. Because you get to ask the person, how many times can you take 8 go again into pistol shots? You just let me know. You let me know. Magnetic Shockwave, blue 4 power 3 block. Overloop is actually one card I do want to talk about, and the thing that hurts me is I've been trying to get people on this card forever. And the reason why this card is really good, because it doesn't clear all of the dragons with one shot. But what this allows you to do is you can load counters on your pistol, save those counters, overloop, kill a dragon, and it comes back. And you can do plays like this if you have excess mana. Because if you can still clear dragons, have items, counters on your items for next turn, it's just broken. And again, against your other fatigue matchup and other control matchup, this actually can become a must block. Like, Oldhim really can't let this hit more than like once. Because even though we can fatigue the Oldhim, how the pattern usually happens is we will actually have very we'll have like way less cards in their deck if we don't get pistol. If we assemble Exodia very late, we'll have maybe 15 or 20 cards in deck. Right? And things like Overloop hedge that because we can be proactive and no damage, but also be able to recover our cards. So if we send out Overloop and they give us a card, we're just winning. We're just winning that. Payload, 4 power, 3 block, blue pitch. I'll talk about the next 2 cards in conjunction because I've had a few people ask me why Whisper and Sift and why they're not just attacks. The reason why these aren't just attacks, in your Exodia matchups, your goal is to find Exodia as soon as possible. You cannot accidentally stumble into Exodia a lot of times and win. You will probably need to Spark for one. And Whisper and Sift get you to that faster. Obviously, Whisper allowing you to opt cards to the bottom if it's not an item or a direct. A lot of times you'll just send it to the bottom. And Sif obviously just lets you draw into the cards, and having go again if you draw into an item in like a blue, it's just amazing because then you kind of get to play and you don't really have a, you don't really take, what's the word, what's the way I'm wanting to explain this? You don't lose a bunch for that kind of play. Because again, your primary focus is to establish Exodia. And if you can do this stuff without sacrificing too much life, because that is the big thing, it's pretty amazing. These are actually two of the. So my principles don't arsenal anything outside of a direct, an instant, or an item. This is one of the few examples where you can actually break that rule and arsenal one of these things. Because they act as like kind of like half Spark of Geniuses where they don't maybe always guarantee the item, but they can just get you closer to that item. And they're also blue block threes. This round's on me. I do play this into every single matchup because it's a blue block 3. But alternatively going first, this card is bonks. This card is genuinely bonkers. Because what will happen if you go first? You'll swing pistol. People are going to be like, well, why? It's turn 0. Haha! You're stupid. I'm going to block and get the filter. And they're going to be like, oh, that's cool. This round's on me? And then your opponent's going to be like, oh. So now I have the option. I can swing pistol again. Now, here's the choice. If they now like their hand, they're going to take another 2 for free. And they're going to start this turn with this round's me effect, which is bonkers for us. Or they can block again, filter again, but now this got milled 2 cards. And they still have this round's me as on the for their next turn. I've actually been experimenting, actually playing this rounds on me into Lexi. I have had very, very mixed results. Same with the Dromai. I used to always play into the Dromai. But that was when they were on Pure Dragons. On the aggro build, I'm a little bit less inclined to want to do something like that. But again, into Lexi specifically, I do think they might struggle to use all the cards in their hand. Especially if they're like on a 3 of a kind turn or something like that. Now, like if you 3 of a kind and draws them to a Rain Rages or a 3 of a kind, well, that just sucks. Well, like, you take those chances sometimes. Again, I'm having currently mixed results with it. But it is something I would like other people to try and see how it works out. Lastly, we have Blue Throttle and Blue Zipper Hit as our main deck stuff. In the side deck, we have one of the cards that I was not the first to try this out. Shout out to Chris Ray for this deck into Ranger. Specifically Ranger. It also does come up against Assassin. But Infectious Host. Infectious Host in our deck is a 0 for 4. Give you back whatever you gave me. So one of the big things is they'll give you Frailty tokens. They'll give you Blood Rock Box tokens. They'll give you Inertia tokens. And Infectious Host says, alright, for no resources, you can have that token back. And here's 4 damage. You're probably going to take the 4 damage. Because why would you? It doesn't have an actual on hit. Again, and even if it did, it's not that detrimental to you. Like if this was a 0 for 4 draw a card and that effect, maybe they would. But if it was like on hit, gain 1 life, they would probably be like, alright, cool, you can gain your life. But the fact that they give you an inertia token, you're like, okay, here you get to have an inertia token as a ranger. You don't get to set up an explosive 5 to 6 card hand. Or especially when the game is close, because like I said, a lot of times you're going to be on the fatigue, you're going to be on the single chamber versus ranger. If they give you a Blood Rock Box token, you can give it back to them. And that little bit of life loss could actually result in a kill. It's a very, very interesting card. I have had enough personal success to where I'm going to keep it in. I've seen a few people run it and have success. But I will say it is probably one of the more cuttable cards in this deck. So if it is not something you're privy to, or you don't have a lot of these style of decks in your local meta, it can be cut for something different. Oasis is into your dominant matchups or into Kano. I will say this, Kano will just pitch stack into you and probably just kill you. Mind you, I am a Kano player. Now that Control Dash is more part of the meta, I've played against a lot of Control Dash. I haven't lost a single Control Dash. Because if they want to do the thing, and I wish I could replicate this in paper, and hopefully I get to replicate it in paper. If they're going to be like, well, I'm just going to sell into Oasis for spits, and you can't kill me, I'm going to be like, cool. Aether Wildfire. And they're going to be like, Oasis, but I'm like, okay. Aether Wildfire. They're going to be like, aha, you fool. I'm going to be like, Aether Wildfire. And they're going to be like, okay, well, I guess that's doing damage. I'm like, yeah, I figured. Alright, now my other Wildfire's going to get buffed. Alright, now my first Wildfire is getting buffed. So now my Blazing Aether has 3 buffs on it. Okay. Now I'm going to play another Blazing Aether. It's going to have another buff on it. Are you dead? Did we do it? Did we kill you? And especially, that combo is even more deadly, is if you're palming those cards and hoping that will save you and you can actually be a little more aggressive. If you want to fire pistols, have like 2 floating and have double Oasis and thinking you're going to live, you're dead. Like, if you're pocketing double Oasis, you kind of can't do anything. And the reason why you can't do anything against, like, Kano, for example, is the more cards you already have used on your turns, that's less AB you have. So let's say you loaded your pistol and shot it once or twice. You don't have any more floating. You pitch another card. So now you have a blue in hand. Probably 2 mana floating because you just pitched a blue. Oasis in Arsenal. Oasis in hand. Yeah, Kano probably still kills you. Like, straight up. Kano might still kill you. It is on the Kano to have the proper pitch stack, and believe me, pitch stacking for a double Oyster Spy is extremely hard. Pitch stacking for a single Oyster Spy literally is like cakewalk now. Like, that part's just easy. But it's the double Oyster Spy tech that is difficult. I don't know why I made this a Kano video, but but obviously again, this is for your dominant matchups, like Bravo, Azalea, and obviously your Kano matchup. There was a time that we like ran this into like most decks, but one of the reasons that we stopped was because if you didn't have Tunic on 3 and you had an Oasis in hand, it felt so horrible. Like, you either had to force yourself to use your Iron Hides when you probably didn't want to, or you had to pitch like a blue Oasis, like against like Fire or Briar, and then they were like, well, you just lost 2 cards to block 4. Anyway, here's my other 7 cards this turn. And you just end up losing that exchange. Yeah, and you now have to save your Tunic just to Oasis. So unless all 3 Oases are out of your deck, you can't activate Tunic. Because the turn that you draw an Oasis and don't have Tunic on 3, it just feels horrible. And I don't want to be put in that situation. We're running 1 Remembrance. You don't need more than 1 a lot of times. There was a time I was running 2. But I do think smarter resources and that you'll need the Remembrance less. Now, with Pummel being around with like Uzuri and Guardian, Remembrance does get a little bit more extra. But the 2 biggest decks right now, or 2 of the 3 biggest decks, don't make you discard. Dromai and Lexi don't make you discard. Well, they'll make you discard. Sorry, they'll make you discard. Like if they play Coax of Frailty, but you're not going to discard an item or something, and that's all you're trying to get back. You're trying to get items, or you're trying to get back poppers, or like specifically into Odom. You'll cycle back in your 3 for 7s, You'll cycle back in 3 for 7, so you can continue doing that chain that I talked about earlier of like pistol, pistol, 3 for 7. Represent like a monstrous amount of damage. On to the sideboard equipment. We have Achilles Accelerator, No Rune Gloves, and Verizon Helmet as your AB. But the lone generic equipment in the sideboard is Vambrace. Now, I've got a lot of people having very mixed feelings about Vambrace. But obviously, it's here for two reasons. It's obviously here for future proofing. Whenever Illusionist comes back out, like Prism has been announced. Spectre Shields will be back in the meta, and this is very good against Spectre Shields. And two is into Oldhim. It doesn't make the matchup more favorable. It just makes the matchup a little more efficient and speedier. Because the one issue with the matchup, especially if you're against an Oldhim that hasn't played against our style of deck much, they might be a little bit slower on their game actions, which will cause time to leak away. If you can just give your early pistol shots meaning, and you can send pistol for 2, then try to crowd apart, you Vambrace, it still leaks 1, you'll notice that late game where they usually would be at like 15, now they're at like 7. And that's all because of things like Vambrace. Vambrace just makes your clock faster, so you don't have to worry about the clock as much. If that makes sense. When it comes to the sideboard, this current sideboard that's going to be uploaded is not accurate. I will try, if I remember, to get an accurate sideboard. There are just a few sideboard matchups that I'm not 100% confident in yet. And that will be something I'm working on. So hopefully by the time you see this video, because this video will be uploaded probably in the middle of the week, probably like 2 or 3 days before the R10 season. There might be a sideboard guide up. But if not, obviously just try your best to use your logic on the things that you're bringing in and know why you're bringing in it. Well, that's going to be the video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you guys like, favorite, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.